Yes, indeedy. Welcome to the Upful LIFE Podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz, and this is episode number 30. Dirty 30. Coming at you live and direct from Isolation Station out here in the Sierra Nevada foothills of Northern California. It's been a hell of a week, but we're so grateful you are tuning in right now. And we're back on the Upful LIFE Podcast. And just want to take a moment right off the bat and acknowledge just the seismic losses over the past week in the music culture. Moment of silence. Ellis Marsalis, patriarch of the great Marsalis family of New Orleans and jazz music, an institution. The iconic Bill Withers needs no introduction nor explanation. And the national pastime that is John Prine. The latter of whom passed just a few hours ago before I started recording this. Now, not really going to go into a long-winded diatribe about these legends of their time. The history books have been and will continue to be written. And many folks who have been around these cats will write and talk and speak and pay tribute to them. So I just wanted to, off the top, acknowledge Ellis Marsalis, who we heard a great deal about on the Derek Smoker episode of the Upful LIFE Podcast, and of course Bill Withers and John Prine. John Prine, who we heard a touching story about and from Chris Perella on episode 29, Isolation Station, Volume 1. So thanks to Chris Perella and Kendall Deflin, who I started calling her by her married name, Kendall Corso, but indeed, in terms of backline, her organization, she's Kendall Deflin. So thanks to Kendall, and of course Billy Ayuso down there in New Orleans. And we're going to move into episode 30, and the second volume of Isolation Station, or this sort of adaptation of the Upful LIFE Podcast in light of the virus and fallout. So we've got a series of really sweet interviews today for episode 30. I started things off with a little more reggae, but indeed this is our dear friends Lettuce and Trapezoid Dub that you're hearing off the top here. And Lettuce dropped a really cool track this week called Funkin' From Home. And it's one of those recorded, each band member in a different place, and was mixed by Schmeens, who was a guest on this podcast some time ago, Adam Smirnoff, and they put that out on their YouTube, so check that out from Lettuce. And I'm going to shift to their latest track, Ndugu, which is on their forthcoming album, Resonate, which should be out in early May. But right now you're going to hear Ndugu, and then we'll introduce our first guest on the Upful Life Podcast, episode 30. So for my first guest this week on episode 30, we're going to have Richie G, DJ Richie G, or Richard Grossman. He's a super fan that I've come to know and love in the greater music community that, you know, attends a number of festivals, specifically Jazz Fest, Bear Creek for a long time, Halloween, Jam Cruise, you name it. Richie's been out to High Sierra here in NorCal. And he's a part of the greater Lettuce family. That's why I'm one of the reasons why I'm kicking things off with a bunch of Lettuce here is because Richie's my first guest, and we do touch on a little bit about Lettuce in the chat. But the reason that I reached out to him, other than the fact that he's a hardcore Lettuce and funk and really all types of music fanatic, but also he has lived through the COVID-19 virus and seems to have come out the other side. And in light of everyone, you know, asking, do you know anyone that has the virus? You know, we see that posted on social media, or you may hear that from a friend or family member. Well, we're going to put on some folks through the next few weeks that have, in one way or another, encountered this in real life, in their own lives, in their families. And Richie's one of those guys. So I picked up the phone and gave him a call once he told me he was well enough to talk. And by well enough, I mean he's been doing his DJ live streams throughout his COVID-19 journey. But I guess he felt good enough and well enough to let us record a conversation about his experience and also the money he's raising for masks and why Lettuce is so special to him. And before actually we go to Richie, I just want to acknowledge another friend and musician in the music community that I've come to know and love for like 22 years now, and that'd be Todd Stoops. Todd and I lived in Vermont at the same time, and we're in college at the same time, and actually played shows together in different bands at Higher Ground, at the old Higher Ground in Burlington, Vermont. And I got word today that Todd Stoops' wife, Freya, and Todd have tested positive, or I guess she tested positive, and it's a given that he has it because they, play house and have been isolated and quarantined together. And she's a nurse, been on the front lines, exposed to it all. So shout out to the Stoops fam. We're wishing you the best. Let Richie G be inspiration that you too shall persevere. I want to shout out all the health workers out there, and we talk about that in a later interview on this podcast, but all the health workers out there on the front lines. My boy Gabe Rock in Arizona, who's a guitar player of the first band I was ever in elementary school and middle school into high school, so Gabe Rock, keep on keeping on. And my man Paul, Paterfamilias, Paul up there in Boston, dedicated listener to the Upful Life Podcast, huge fan of music of all kinds, dating back to the early days of the Dead and the Almonds, and has regaled me with stories of the different shows he's seen, Little Feat, etc. He's a fantastic human that I had the pleasure of serendipitously meeting at Jazz Fest on the fairgrounds last year, and I happen to know that he too is a nurse on the front lines. And shout out to Paul, shout out to Gabe, shout out to everyone out there in the front lines, Freya Stoops. I bet each and every one of us that's listening to this knows someone that both has the virus and or is a health worker out there doing the Lord's work. All that to introduce my dear friend DJ Richie G on the Upful Life Podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz. This is Lettuce and Dugu.
This is Richie G.
Richie G, it's B. Getz. How you doing?
Awesome, buddy. Great to hear your voice.
Yeah, man. Welcome to the Upful Life Podcast.
Glad to be here, my man. Honored.
Yeah, and it's an absolute joy to have you on, especially in light of everything that's going on. So, you're such a valued member of the music community that I'm so blessed to be a part of. And, we get to share in some of the great moments in life, musically, artistically, culturally, friendship. But, I see a lot of folks asking, do you know anyone that actually has the virus, right? You see that a lot all over the web. And, I happen to know and love you like many others. And you, unfortunately, have lived through this shit in real life. So, first things first, if you're comfortable doing so, just take folks through how you got it or how you got through it and where you're at now.
Awesome. Yeah, no problem, man. First of all, I appreciate all those kind words. I'm honored and glad to be part of, like the most beautiful community. A lot of this has to do, since I met my wife, we've really delved into it together, and it's such an awesome time. It brings me so much joy. And so moving, forward, I would have to say we're not positive exactly where I contracted it, but I will say my wife in the wine business did attend a huge convention and tasting for all Italian wines. And there was mostly Italian people there presenting their wines. And although they had been, in the States for, probably as much as a month, it had seemed, that it's been going on there for a while. And there's a good chance that she might have become a carrier at that event. And that was early March. And then, who knows, I went to a big benefit. Actually, ironically, it was a New Orleans benefit, the Roots of Music. It's a charity that I've been supporting for many, many years, maybe almost 10 years, provides music instruments for kids in New Orleans, can't afford it, schools that don't have it in their program. And it's a great event I go to every year, and T.A.B played. Actually, my son sat in on a song with Mark Reckler's band, Circus Mind. It was lots of fun. And, there was 300 people there, partying and raging. And it turns out that, we did find out a few others had contracted it from there, but not many. So it's not like I had it at that point and maybe spread it to tons. We've only heard of a few. And so that was like the 7th of March. And then by the 9th, I started feeling sick. By the 10th, on Tuesday, I went with my wife to go do some business in Connecticut, and I was done. I had a fever. I had body aches. I had breathing issues. I couldn't move. I was in bad shape, but still only thought it was the flu. Still thought I was sick. But by the time you get to day 4, 5, and 6, and you still have a fever, and you still can't move your body and your breathing is really interrupted, that's when you start getting nervous. And that's when I started realizing this is probably the virus. And so, went to go get a test. Was able to find a place. It was a clinic. It was kind of like out of a movie. You go there, you can't even wait inside the building. They give you a mask while you wait. Doctor comes in full gear. You can't even see an inch on his body. And I fit all the criteria. They were screening people. They would not give a test unless you had all the symptoms. And I know people that don't have enough symptoms and they can't get the test. So it's still the situation to this day. And so he said, you had the symptoms. He gave me the test, gave me the flu test as well. Said I'll have the flu result in 2 hours, and the coronavirus test, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. And so 2 hours later, I didn't have the flu. I knew it, buddy. I knew I had the virus, and but that was technically the bad news. And then waited like anxiously. My wife and I just called. Maureen kept calling. I kept calling, and finally 7 days later, the doctor called and said, you got it, you're positive. At that point, and I still had fever. It was still like 11, 12 days of fever, and the breathing was still terrible. At that point, we asked, like, should Maureen come in for, a test? They're like, no, she's got it. No need, which was pretty crazy. And that was it. So, just dealt with this. Only immediate friends knew. I really was kind of just dealing with it. I was nervous. I was scared. As I watched deaths grow, I got more scared because the breathing was really tough. Sleeping is really tough. No appetite. It was just a lot. Those are the main things. If anyone's wondering, it's all, you need to really have most of those things: fever, body aches, breathing, appetite. Smell is kind of went either way. I couldn't remember if I could smell. And it was 21, 22, 23 days. I still not 100%. And, I'm like, I don't know, 3.5 weeks in at least. I feel like it's still going to be a while before I'm there. And that's basically, it. Maureen took great care of me. And that's, been dealing with it. Look, I'm very lucky to have her in the same house to be quarantined with. Sorry to be all squishy, B.
No sorries at all. Holy shit, Richie. I mean, wow. Thank you for taking us through that roller coaster ride. I cannot even imagine, but, in some way, like you telling folks and you're such a people person. You're such a personable guy, outgoing. You have really great and special friendships and relationships with so many of us that when it came to you having it is really like the tipping point moment for so many of us who were like transitioned from this being something we saw in the news to something that was real. So I appreciate you, letting folks know long before you actually got your test result that you were like, wake up, folks, it's happened to me. And shout out to your lovely wife, superstar partner, Mo. I mean, she was already a rock star, but I mean, come on. Incredible that she was able to nurse you through this. 23 days. I mean, holy moly. Think about that. Like, really hard to imagine being sick and having that foreboding uncertainty hovering over. Yet it never really dimmed your positivity. And the reason I know that is because, when you've been strong enough and able, you've busted out the tables because you're a DJ first and foremost. So let's transition from the virus to like the positive vibes.
Sure.
What's going on with DJ Richie G and the live streams? You were one of the first cats to really get up and running, and your parties have been great. And I know you got a big one planned for some birthdays this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what, listen, Maureen and I can have fun in a closet, for, a year. So it doesn't take much for me to, I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed. But, music's been our life. That, since Maureen and I have been together 15, 16 years, it's always been about music. And I have to say, every single friend it seems I have either connects with me through music, or I met through music, along with all these, great musicians and bands that you and I are both so lucky to know and fraternize with. And, immediately when I saw this thing was going into a shutdown and a quarantine, I knew Facebook Live was something that people are doing. I could see, and this Lessons Live is something I even talked about a year ago, believe it or not. And so I knew it. I knew that, this would be a way to get people, to tune in, see me, listen to good tunes, get them dancing, and then we also immediately installed the Zoom aspect. So we have two links. We go Facebook Live. And then we have a Zoom link, and there could be, 100 people scrolling through screens, just dressed up, putting on lights, dancing, drinking, having a good time and connecting, and then there's always like a little after party when the music stops where people could talk a little bit. And then I just bust out the tunes, and, week one, it was an immediate success. I mean, I've gone Facebook Live with a show and, get 10, 12, 15 people, but there was like hundreds, right across. And so I made an event out of it. And every week it's been growing. I've been trying to change the theme up. I don't want to do the same set. I got a bunch of genres in my arsenal. So, I'm trying to switch it up and, please everybody. And this week we got some special birthdays. We got, another big, heavy hitter on the music scene, Josh Raskin and Karen Dugan. I know you know them. And it's Karen's birthday, and it's my dear friend Liz's birthday, who's like my little sister. And then you got Ellen and Michelle Goldblatt and Rose Diaz. So we have, I know this is probably air after the show happens, but we knew it was a big birthday week. And to be honest, B, this Saturday night, we were all scheduled to be at the Brooklyn Bowl for Dumpster Fuck. And we had like lanes reserved, and it was going to be it was probably going to be hundreds of us there to celebrate all these people's birthdays. I think some of the girls were going to ALO on Friday, and there was some other brunch on Sunday. So we're like, let's make this a birthday week, because we were all planning to be together anyway. And I figured in doing so, I'll get out of the disco scene and old school hip hop and funk, which is what I'm most noted for. And I'll do a jam band. And I guess I can give a little bit away, but we're going to have some folks. I'm blessed. Some of the musicians are going to do some shout outs. And we also got, some deep cuts from people that you and I both know that was sent to me special. Stuff that people will not have heard anywhere. Anytime.
I have no doubt, Richie. That's awesome that you're doing that. And I got to say, back when I lived on the East Coast in the early 2000s, I was really indoctrinated into that, it was in essence the New York City Freaks music scene. And I used to take the train up from Philly, and several of the folks that you mentioned and that greater music community that helped make me, for real, not just with the writing, but in general. So it's awesome and really special that you have the ability to kind of step in given these circumstances and at least give everybody a birthday party of some kind. And I hope to log in and be there myself. And I don't know if we're going to get dressed up because we're out here in the sticks, but we'll definitely check in. And going back to what you talked about before, when you were blessed and fortunate to be able to be tested in the early goings, the scene you described at the testing site and the doctors and the way they were masked up and suited up and dressed and et cetera. And I got to say, I've heard from two dear friends who are nurses on the front lines. My friend Paul, who's an avid listener to this show and a great dude who I finally met at Jazz Fest last year. Older cat. You'd love him, Richie. One day we'll all hang. And my bandmate from my elementary school band, Gabe, who's out in Arizona, also on the front lines. So given that you painted that picture, and then I also spoke to James Casey yesterday. You're going to be on the show with James. And he talked about his own mother on the front lines as a nurse. So just shout out to the health workers everywhere who are basically the reason why you're able to have this conversation with me with it basically in the rear view.
Well, B, if I may just interrupt for a second, I did leave out, and I will say, this is not a shameless plug. This is a necessary plug. I will say, this show's going to be late, so I'm not even going to get it through. I was going to say this weekend's show, we're hoping to raise some money, actually, 100% of which, whatever we raise, I found a connection for disposable masks. And we've already in touch with the guy and told him we may raise quite a bit of money. And we're going to buy 100% of the money is going to go to buy as many masks as we get, and we're going to bring them directly to Elmhurst Hospital to help these frontline workers, to give them more protection and more safety. And I know a lot of people want to try and find and do something, and there's a lot of people out there that need help. But the frontline people are the ones that, I'm really in awe of right now. And, although maybe a little uncomfortable putting some form of a tip jar, it's not a tip jar. It's, let's all band together and help the people that need the most amount of help here. So I know the show is airing on Tuesday. I apologize, listeners, but I guess it's never too late. And in any case, that's what we're doing this week.
It's no apologies necessary, Richie. It'll only be like a couple days later, and I'm sure people's funds will still be good. So I'll put that fundraiser in the show notes. So if anyone hears this, they'll be able to still give money a few days after the fact. That said, as you mentioned earlier so astutely, and I do say this to all my guests, that it really is the music thing, the La Cosa Nostra, this thing of ours, right? That's how we are all connected on this podcast, socially, spiritually. So before we let you go, I got to ask, is there an artist, a song, a show, an album that is getting you through? And especially you who were sick and living through the nightmare that is the COVID-19. Any music you want to share with the folks that you haven't already shared, maybe already on your numerous live streams? Just something specific.
Yeah, honestly, there's not any one artist. All I'll say is through the very first, the most of the first half of COVID, music wasn't even a possibility. That's how bad it was. I couldn't move. It was that bad. But I will say this, I have to give the props and throw out to, the love of my friends and, now family, the guys from Lettuce, their motivation, and knowing what they're going through, and I'm closest with them, and a long conversation with Adam Deitch recently, who was kind of like blown away by this whole virus thing, and pretty regular calls with Schmeens. They've kept me close to the entire musical community, just in the battle that these guys are having in the entire, music world. It's really tough. But I will say I've been doing lots more research now since I'm better than I ever have. And I'm really digging up stuff, and I'm listening to other DJs, and, the funk moves me. And, Lettuce moves me and inspires me, and they're a big part of how all this began, and right from the beginning when Maureen and I started our run. And I think that's really the most of it, Moved by the Fish album last night. Really 2 nights ago, I did enjoy that. I think that was genius by them. And I think that's, just a collaboration for me. Being a DJ, it can't be any one artist is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, aho, as they say, and amen. I didn't expect just one, but if I asked for one, you gave me a couple. So as you well know, I basically got close to you through Lettuce.
Yes.
Lettuce is my religion, and this is a big Lettuce podcast, a big Lettuce house, and as I stand here at this glorious expanse, this is a big Lettuce ranch that I'm on right now. And so shout out to the guys in Lettuce Funk. They dropped a great new quarantine jam earlier today. I'm sure you got a glimpse of that. So for those that don't know, I started a fundraiser for the Lettuce crew. The guys that actually, put their stage together and tech their instruments and make sure they get from place to place. And also, Bo Williams, who we both know and love, was on this podcast, and he was instrumental in getting them out of Europe really quick at the last possible moment. So if you're interested in listening, we'll also put a link to the Lettuce Crew donation fund in the show notes. With that, Richie, I'll see you on Saturday night virtually. And we'll check in with you down the road. Thank you for your time.
B, thanks for having me. Again, I'm blessed and honored, and I'm glad we're getting the word out there. And I'll see you Saturday night, brother. Love you, and love to Alicia.
Yeah, love to you and Mo. Peace, brother.
All right, you got it, bro.
I want to say thank you to my man DJ Richie G. Check out that fundraiser. We'll put the link in the show notes. Raise money for those masks. And like I said, if anybody has any of those opportunities out there, raising money for the healthcare workers, or really any endeavor you want to hit me to of that nature, please, b.gets@upfullife.com. Now, as you hear the Trey Anastasio Band live take on Money, Love, and Change, we're going to bring on a friend of mine who's been a member of Trey Band going on 8+ years now, James Casey, man of many talents on the saxophone. He's a vocalist. He's played with Lettuce back in around 2010, 2011. And he's been in a number of super jams and cool projects. Went on in New Orleans at Jazz Fest at Bear Creek. And also was a member of Meghan Trainor's touring band. And went on the road with her. But he's been a major cog in the T.A.B. wheel for, almost a decade now. And I had a great opportunity to get on the phone with James and talk with him about, he was real early on the virus and was warning everyone, really before almost anyone else I could think of. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to him, and also just wanted to check in with him because he's out in Hawaii. He got away from New York City for reasons he'll discuss in the interview, and we talk about his time with Trey, and tells a real crazy story that I won't spoil in the intro that blow your mind. So with that, we'll hear a little bit more of Money, Love, and Change, Trey Anastasio Band, and then we'll hear from my man James Casey on the Upful Life Podcast, episode 30, Isolation Station, Volume 2. Yes, indeedy.
Hello?
James, Speakettes.
What's up, man?
Hey, man. How you doing today?
I honestly can't really complain right now. I'm sitting out in this backyard with a whole bunch of birds chirping, man. How you doing?
I would say the same, my friend. Yeah, I'm in a rural place out here in Northern California with some birds and some trees and some, quiet, so I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us on the Upful Life Podcast. I've known you for a while, but I haven't talked to you in a while. And one day I'd like the opportunity to really sit down and rap with you about your career, which has been really wonderful to be a part of and observe. But the reason I'm calling you, the reason I reached out to you is obviously we're going through this just unprecedented pandemic slowdown beyond our wildest comprehension. And you, for one, were among the earliest folks I saw, warning your friends and your fans about what was to come. And I am here to own the fact that I was somebody who might have thought, hey, he's a bit of an alarmist here. It sounds pretty doomsday, James. So what did you see before the rest of us, or feel before the rest of us?
Well, I don't want to act like I am some guru or anything. I was on tour with Trey in January. We started somewhere around like the early to mid-January with rehearsals and then the tour. And what happens on tour is you get a lot more time on your hands than you normally would, and probably more than most people would normally have. So we all heard little inklings about some weird virus over in China coming out, but everyone over here was more focused on the impeachment, like in terms of national news. And when I saw that the virus kept spreading, and it wasn't in like a very small place. It was in Wuhan, and Wuhan, obviously we know now, is bigger than New York, and it's a hub. So people, it's a business hub. So a lot of people, manufacturing and whatnot, they fly out of there. So when I saw that it left China was when I saw that it was going to be a problem, because it's a virus. And while that sounds pretty benign or whatever, like it's just a virus, it's just a thing. If it has a way of spreading that's much faster than the flu. Now, we all know that now, but I saw that in reports at the end of January. And when I saw that, that's when I knew it was going to be really bad. Unfortunately, it is where it is right now, and it's become something dangerous and deadly, like to the whole world. But I saw it I started paying attention in the middle of January, and I became alarmed at the end of January. So right when the tour was ending.
Right on. Yeah, I remember your posting about it initially, and I got to be honest, like most of us just we're so engulfed, whether it's our attention to our day-to-day lives or the war, the impeachment on a macro level. It came like out of nowhere to 98 percentile of the population. And I feel like you were one of the first people that, level-headedly said to anyone who would listen, wake up and pay attention. This thing is for real. So allow me to own the fact that, yeah, I might have been thinking you were an alarmist, and even more so, thank you for at least lighting the fuse for so many of us to be curious. Because it's like, wow, if James is this freaking concerned, I should maybe look into this a little further than I am. And that was really the beginning of my own, research, if you will, before it was shoved down our throats. What was it like on the tour as you were like, taking in this data and information on a daily basis? You're on the road with these people. You guys talk about everything. What was the general vibe with the band, with the crew, with, the people in your life?
Okay, well, to be honest, in the beginning, it was jovial. We were on tour. Everybody's happy. We're on tour for the most part. Like, Trey's band, everybody is real cool and down to earth, and, we all have fun together and whatever. So it was a cool situation. But then Ciro got sick when we got to Texas. I think we were in Austin, and he got sick. And that was when, that was around like the January 23rd, somewhere around there. And that was right when the virus had left China and was starting to get pop-ups everywhere else. And we were joking about it. we were literally joking. We flew from Phoenix after our show there to Austin. And, he got sick the next day. It was the flu. He had the flu type A. So it was a really, really difficult flu. And he had to take like 4 or 5 days off. But we were joking, he could have the corona. But like in the back of my mind, I'm like, wait, he actually could, because we were just in an international airport. And that was when I started doing a whole lot more digging. And yeah, after that, I mean, it definitely wasn't a joke anymore after that. Like, right when we found out that he was fine, we realized that this is not something to be joking about. And then tour ended in the beginning of February, and we see what's happened since then.
Right. I remember that with Ciro and saw that online that he had gotten ill. And I honestly never even connected the dot at all. It's good to know he didn't have this, but nonetheless, it was, a wake-up call of sorts. And then so the tour ends, and as you mentioned, things just, spiraled at warp speed to where we are now. So just to pivot a little bit, like, what's your reality? If you care to let the people know, like, what did you choose to do with your time? And maybe just, like, how did you navigate, like, the professional side of being a touring musician and having your entire industry just abruptly pause?
It hasn't been fun. It's not a very, it's difficult all around for everybody involved, especially the instrumentalists, the touring people, the people who, the crew, from the crew to management, everybody's situation is halted. So, I had a friend who, I had a planned trip already. I planned it in January to come to Maui for a week or so. And when what I saw was happening in New York, I was supposed to leave on a Sunday, but I played a show on Thursday at Brooklyn Bowl on May 6th, I believe. And then I changed my flight that night and flew out the next morning just to get away, because they had just started testing in New York, and it was just going from 1 to 2 to 50 to whatever it is now. So I got out before all that, but leading up to that, I bought masks. Like, I have N95s. I'm like the one person on earth who's not in the hospital who still has those. I bought hand sanitizer. I bought all that stuff, but I started buying that stuff in like the beginning to the middle of February. And I tried to tell folks, but right now I'm in Kauai. A friend of mine has an Airbnb, and they haven't been able to be filled, obviously, because they shut down the whole island. And instead of flying back to New York after my trip to Maui, I flew out here. And I'm just going to be here until until life gets a little bit better back home, because New York is pretty ugly right now.
Yeah, man, it sure is ugly in a lot of places, New York, New Orleans specifically. So we want to send love out to our musical fam and everyone we know. I know you're from the New York area or live there, and it's got to be a little bit hard to be so far. But at the same time, it's a blessing that you're where you are in this, beautiful Kauai and Maui before that. But also, difficult to be away from your people and everything as well.
Yeah, the main reason why I decided that I had to leave is because I have asthma. I have really bad lungs, and I've had asthma my whole life. So I can't, a respiratory disease could be fatal for me already. And this particular one is so much worse than everything else that I had to leave. And unfortunately, we've lost a lot of people. I don't know when you're going to air this, but just yesterday, Ellis Marsalis died. And Ellis, I remember taking a lesson or two from him when I was in between high school and college, and I played a show with him back then. And I remember he was such a great teacher. He was obviously a great player. He's Branford Marsalis' dad. He's Wynton Marsalis' dad. But he comes in. He's the patriarch of that whole family. But he was an amazing music teacher, and he's gone from this thing, and it's just. It was devastating to hear, but unfortunately, it's just going to be that's going to be what's going to happen and continue to happen until this thing passes, and it's very, very sad.
It really is, and thank you for honoring Ellis like that. I saw that yesterday, and we had a fellow, Derek Freeman from New Orleans, drummer. I'm sure you know him. He studied with Ellis many years, and he told a lot of stories about Ellis. And listeners to this podcast, I'm sure, are familiar with his contributions, and it's just beyond a shame that it was this that so abruptly took him from everyone. So, rest in peace to Ellis. And I was wondering, because, you mentioned about the asthma, and I didn't know that was a consideration with your choice to leave. Is that something that you have to really deal with regularly, just being a saxophone player?
Honestly, being a saxophone player actually helped with my asthma. It's when I was younger, I tore my ACL playing football. In high school, and I had to get a knee surgery. And I don't think I've ever told this on an interview before, but when I went in to get the knee surgery when I was 16, my vitals crashed and I flatlined because of the anesthesia. So they had to, reinflate my lungs or whatever after they brought me back. And because of that, I already only had 70% lung function. So I had to do a whole lot of yoga breathing exercises to even be able to play a full phrase on a saxophone. But it's not something, and because of that whole situation, I used to get bronchitis 5 times a year or something like that. But this particular thing would have probably taken me out. So I had to go. I had to get away. Yeah, that's the answer to that.
Right on, man. Well, I'm glad that you had the option and things lined up so you could get away. And we can't stand to lose anyone else. We don't see when anyone gets sick anymore that already is. And, you stay where you are as long as you got to. And the music and the New York and everything else will be ready and waiting when the time is right. I don't want to it's so glorious to chat with you about stuff. And I can't believe that you got brought back to life. We'll have to revisit that one down the road.
Anytime, man. We can talk about it.
Oh my goodness, man. That's just one of those things you never expect to hear when I'm going to do an interview right now. But anyway, I want to give some folks, I've known you as a musician, and I call you friend for, better, really a decade now. And I can remember seeing you at a Fish show once, and way back in the day in Madison Square Garden, I want to say. And it's just been an absolute joy to see the way you've just been embraced into the Trey Band as a band and the greater music community that's associated with that whole world that I've been a part of for a long time. So just to give some folks some like cool vibe, cheery shit, and less of the doomsday stuff, which we have to talk about. But man, like, can you just reflect a little bit on what it's been like, whether it's musically or the chemistry, anywhere you want to take the Trey Band experience thus far?
Okay. So I joined Trey's band in 2012, and I've told the story a few times, but when I first got the phone call, I had no idea who he was. Some dude named Trey called me, left a message on my phone, and I was in Arizona at the time, and I listened to the message. He was like, "Hi, I'm Trey. I have this band called Fish, and I wanted to know if you wanted to be a part of my band." I'm like, "I don't know who Fish is. I don't know who Trey is." I hung up the phone and went back to sleep. I was in Lettuce at the time, so I called, like, when I woke up later, I called up Kraz. I was like, "Yo, man, some dude named Trey called me." He's like, take the call, call him back. So, yeah, called him back, got that whole situation figured out, and it's been a great ride, honestly. He is one of the most honest people that I've met, and honest in the sense of, like, he's not putting himself out to be anything that he's not. He's not trying to be a nice guy. He is a nice guy. He's not trying to be a kind person. He is a kind person. He's not trying to be an excitable person about music, because he is exactly that, and he's exactly what he seems to be on stage, off stage, which is more than I can say for a lot of the people that I've ever played with and been around, because I mean, to be 100% honest, we are in the field of putting on a show. We're performing. So sometimes our performances have to include, us trying to make everybody feel good or whatever. I'm trying to make everybody, like, a happy song, we have to be happy. A sad song, we have to look depressed. Like that. If you're in the pop world, there's a lot of that stuff. But with him, everything is exactly, it's him. He's not trying to act. He's not trying to play. And that's refreshing for me. He's also one of the most prolific people I've ever met in terms of writing. I don't know how he writes so much, but he writes so much music. Like even right now, he's writing like a song a day on Instagram with this quarantine. And I literally have written one song since I've been in Kauai, and I've been here for like 2 weeks. I don't know how he does it. It's kind of crazy. It's highly irritating that it takes me so long and it takes him so little time to just be able to emote some things. So that's the thing I actually appreciate the most. Like besides him being honest and sincere, the fact that I can watch him create so much in such a small amount of time. It's beautiful.
Yeah, man, he's a Jedi for sure, and it's awesome that he's brought you into the fold, and now you have like such a prominent role in the sound and your vocals and stuff. So I wanted to ask because during the Trey thing, maybe in a period of time, I don't know how, I can't remember how you juggled it, but I know you went out with Megan Trainor and even had a vocal solo tune, if I recall. And what is it like, these artists that are so established, and you're just but you are a member of their band, and they see something within you enough to give you the spotlight. That's got to feel like amazing to be brought into the fold and be given such a prominent role in these like huge artists with such adoring fan bases.
Yeah, it is amazing, and I appreciate it. I don't know exactly why it is that I ended up in these situations, but the artists tend to trust me because I I can't fix my face. That's what my mom used to tell me. Like, you need to fix your face when you're on stage. You can't like, if it's sounding bad, you can't you can't let everybody know, because they can't quite tell what you can tell. But no matter what, I'm honest. So when people ask me, when an artist asks me how things are going, how things sound, whatever, I'm completely honest in what I think. And what I think may be wrong, but I'm not going to sugarcoat what I think with anything that's going on. Also, the thing about Trey's band, everybody in there is very, very talented, especially, you know, Jennifer and Natalie. So I never considered myself a singer. I always considered myself a saxophone player who could, you know, I could sing backgrounds or whatever. But it's over the last few years, things have just kind of evolved and shifted in a way that I've had to sing a whole lot more. And because I've had to sing, I've gotten better at singing. Because I've gotten better at singing, I've had more opportunities to sing. It's kind of like a snowball effect. So Trey found out I could sing. He didn't know I could sing at first, but he found out I could sing. And then because he found out I could sing, I've been singing more and more and more and more. And then he tries to showcase all of us. He tries to make sure that we all get part of the line, like get a little bit of shine, because, you know, we are helping him in his vision. So he wants to help us in ours.
That was really well articulated, man. I know it wasn't the most direct question. So thank you for, you know, taking it there. And that's a really poignant way of reflecting on the experience. I know that it's so, we get you know, again, because going back to the early days, when you get an opportunity like that, it fills me up with pride to see you out there doing it and doing it well. And I got to say, on behalf of music fans everywhere, that it's just amazing where you are, where you've taken it. And obviously, once we get through this darkness, the future is super bright for you, James, obviously for the Trey Band. And I look forward to whatever your next musical endeavor is, who you join up with or what you do. You said you wrote a song, so we're anxiously awaiting the James Casey debut solo record. I'll tell you that much.
Man, it's happening. It's going to happen soon enough. Well, soon doesn't really mean anything anymore right now, but it'll happen. I also want to say something. I know this particular community loves the musicians and the artists or whatever, and I know you all know how difficult it is for us right now. If you can, you see somebody out there like putting themselves out there trying to play guitar, play something for tips, do me a favor and just give them what you can, because honestly, most of us are not doing very well right now. Like, most of us touring musicians aren't at the level where they were able to save up something right now. And I know everybody's hurting, but we don't necessarily have ways of gaining income. So if you see somebody doing something, even if you don't necessarily dig it, just throw them something if you can, because it's rough out here. It's rough out here.
Definitely. I've been trying to do my part, and I know that the community is supporting the best they can, and they need to hear that, and we'll definitely be sure to, we're trying to run down a few of the different streams that are going on this podcast. So I appreciate you mentioning that, and we'll make sure that folks know where and when they can see their favorite artists. And like you said, even ones that may not be their favorite, but they're out there hustling because it's all they got. I am ending every interview with the same question, right? We all know each other one way or another from the music thing. So is there an artist or a song or just really anything at all that has given you strength or peace during this time? Like just a recommendation that you think can really reach some folks when we need it most?
I have a friend. Her name is Jamie Woods. She's an incredible singer. And I was feeling really, really down. I found out a good friend of mine had this virus and he was in the hospital fighting. So like that morning, and I was feeling real, real down. And I just happened to go on the Instagram, and the first thing was up was her singing Bob Marley song. And I was just like, it was one of those things that just hits you right when you hear it. And because of that, I felt like I had to go ahead and do it myself. I obviously am not a singer like she is. She's one of the most incredible singers I've ever heard in my entire life, and that's not me. But the song is called Don't Worry. Like, don't worry about a thing, because every little thing's going to be all right. Obviously, it's a difficult song to hear when everything's going wrong, but that definitely gave me a little bit. It was exactly what I needed at the time, just to help me, just be like, to get out of bed and like, okay, we can continue to do this. I can continue to call up my friends, call up my mom. My mom works at a hospital, so I'm constantly worried about her. But just to keep going, you know.
Indeed. Yeah, the music of Bob Marley, timeless, and we've been on a steady diet of reggae out here on this ranch, so I feel you there, and I appreciate you bringing up your mom, and I want to take the opportunity to thank her and all the workers out there on the front lines risking their own safety and health and wellness to try to stem the flow, flatten the curve, and I know it's a veritable war zone out there, so let your mom know that we really appreciate her.
Definitely.
Thank you, James, for the time on the Upful Life Podcast. We'll do it again down the road when we can really dive deep on your journey.
Let's do it, man. I'm down.
All right, man. Stay safe, and we'll see you on the other side.
Take it easy.
I want to say thank you to my man James Casey for that thoughtful and just really interesting and introspective and informative conversation. James is a real special talent and spirit, and it's been just a privilege to be along for the ride as his career has really taken him to some special places. And it's just a joy to get to chop it up with him when life has slowed down and we're both chilling in these very remote, beautiful, rural places. So with that, we're going to transition to the next interview. Miss SHIRA ELIAS, who you may know from Turkuaz. She was in the Canary Yellow for a long time before they transitioned into the quadrichrome era and left the color wheel theme behind. But you know, SHIRA is really a woman of many talents, and you may have heard her on this podcast for a long form interview back around late February or early March of 2019. So check that out. She kind of tells her story and her journey and her adventure up through that time, which had her in New York City. And in the interim, along with the transition with Turkuaz to this new era, which she discusses in the interview, she is rolling out her long-awaited solo debut, SHIRA ELIAS Goods and Services. So we get the lowdown on that project, which coincidentally includes James Casey, you just heard from. So we hear a little about that, and also her turning the page in her own life professionally and personally and go west. So she relocated during the sort of early stages of the COVID-19 really taking hold here in the U.S., and she's speaking to us from the desert out in the Southwest. So we'll hear more about that and really just get the 411 on Madam SHIRA. on the Upful LIFE Podcast, and you're hearing PJ Morton, his unplugged record. This track is All Right, Everything's Gonna Be All Right. And it's featuring BJ the Chicago Kid. This is the Upful LIFE Podcast, episode 30, Isolation Station, volume 2. SHIRA ELIAS of Turkuaz coming right up.
Hello.
Hi, SHIRA. It's B Getz.
Hi, B.
Welcome back to the Upful LIFE Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was a delight when you came on the show in the early days of me doing this, and it's wonderful to have you back, even if it's under these circumstances.
I know. It's always great to talk to you. Talk to a real one.
Right on. Well, thanks for saying that, and feelings are mutual. So obviously, it goes without saying, these are unprecedented times, and everybody has a lot of time on their hands. So
that's for sure.
Nonetheless, I appreciate you making time to talk to myself and the fans. Where am I reaching you from right now? Where are you talking to me?
I am in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the desert.
Right on.
Out. Yeah.
But as I understand, you picked up and moved your whole life from New York City towards Los Angeles, and moved to Los Angeles as the coronavirus really engulfed the world. What was that cross-country sojourn like at that time?
The timing is all pretty incredible, actually, and somewhat serendipitous, I think. We left, my partner and I, we left New York February 12th, and then we took a week to drive and kind of transition, and it was exciting and scary and beautiful to kind of end the chapter in New York, but, little did we know it was like the perfect timing for us to get out, because right shortly after that, everything started going crazy. So, everything was already in a pretty transitional phase for us, just kind of settling into LA, but feeling really good about it. And then, sure enough, next thing we know, as we're trying to, figure out this new city, everything comes to a screeching halt. I was actually supposed to go back to New York for Brooklyn Comes Alive. Obviously, that didn't happen. It was like everything was pretty up in the air and unstable anyway in our lives, I guess. So now it's like an extension of that pretty much. We're just trying to use the time to make the best of it and focus on projects and, reset everything pretty much. We came out to the desert to kind of get away from LA, from the city, and we've been in Arizona working and relaxing and trying to just keep it all positive, Yeah,
you got to. Thanks for telling that story. I myself also retreated from the Bay Area, and I'm talking to you from a very rural ranch in Northern California, so I understand the need to sort of just get away from the madness, if you will. Do you find that Scottsdale has been calming or tranquil or offered you sanctuary?
God. Absolutely. I mean, it's just a beautiful setting of being in nature in the desert. We've gone on some hikes, of course, with no people around. But yeah, there's definitely something about the desert that kind of lends itself to that reset, getting back into that spiritual, self. And it's been a blessing. I'm so lucky that we've had this opportunity to do this. And being in LA, it was a new place for us. We're living with a new person, and it was scary at the time, so we're like, let's get away. So I'm glad we got to do that when we did.
Yeah, it's definitely a blessing, and not everyone has the opportunity like that, like you and I. So grateful.
Lucky.
Yeah,
so
indeed.
Grateful.
And with this time, obviously, we can talk a little later about the slowdown of the industry, but you were already well into your solo project. And now I guess you got to really, really dig in and dive into that more so than maybe you had allotted the time for. What's going on with SHIRA ELIAS Goods and Services?
Yeah, I mean, again, with the moving of New York, it's just, it almost feels like this whole thing was cosmically, planned for, Turkuaz, as you know, is a pretty on the go. We're touring constantly. And obviously I'm so blessed to have that. But this really now, so the EP will be coming out in the spring, And there's obviously so much to do when you're starting a new solo project, all the content, all the business side of things that I am for the first time really learning how to do, and how to do it all basically on my own. So I've had a lot of time to really, really work on that. And then we just announced that we're going to release a single this Friday, actually, April 10th, that isn't even on the EP and wasn't really meant to be released, but it's called Burning. And when all this started happening, this virus madness, I just really felt like I had to kind of say something for real to the people, and about how I'm feeling, about how I imagine everyone else is feeling. And so the song is really about that. It's kind of just about the anger and the frustration and the fire ultimately that can kind of like change the course of this path that we've gone down in our society. So kind of like a call to arms, because obviously the virus is one thing, but there's so much more. Obviously, it's so much bigger than that, of why we're where we're at and what's going on and how it's being dealt with. So yeah, that's been really fulfilling to be able to kind of focus on saying my truth because, you know, it was the first time I was going to be stepping out on my own for real, and now I was going to anyway, but now I had to. So,
yeah, I mean,
it's been good.
I bet. And we look forward to hearing that song Burnin' on Friday. And, of course, everything that's to follow. You know, a lot of the best, or say most legendary art through the years, music otherwise, has come from a struggle or conflict or just any kind of, you know, adversity. So I have no doubt that, you know, your music will reflect that. Can you talk a little bit about like putting it together, maybe who you called, who's involved, or even your writing process?
Sure. For the EP, for the whole project?
Yeah, just in general with goods and services.
I mean, so basically I've been like slowly kind of working on my own writing over the last, you know, few years, but then Joel, who goes by the producer name of Mega, he's my partner in this, and he kind of helped me bring all these songs to life. We started writing like a year and a half ago together. I also wrote some songs with Sasha Brown, formerly of Sister Sparrow, and we pretty quickly had a group of songs that we wanted to put out, called some of the homies to come record on it. Nick Casarino and Nate Edgar from Nth Power, James Casey's on it. We got AC from Talk. Who else? I'm going to obviously miss so many people. But just, you know, the homies came through as they do. We recorded it all in New York, and it was pretty much like, this is the culmination of my time in New York somewhat, kind of like a love letter to this chapter, knowing that I was going to kind of be moving to LA and starting a new era for myself. So having all the people that I've met on this journey kind of be a part of it, and then kind of rounding out my New York era of what is SHIRA an artist, and like through being with Turkuaz. And so it's pretty much the culmination of that, which is exciting to kind of round that out and give that to the world.
That's awesome. I mean, I got to say, you know, it's really especially poignant to hear you talk about that in light of the conversation we had on the last podcast, where you sort of told your story up through your arrival and your life in New York. So this is another chapter, and look forward to hearing the music. What a sweet collection of players and contributors. You know, big fan of just about everybody you reeled off. And as a matter of fact, James Casey is going to be on this very same podcast as you. So that's very serendipitous as well.
Yeah, I feel so lucky to have these people be down with my shit.
Yeah, well, obviously they all recognize you've got something special, and they want to be a part of that. So that's a testament to what you do and what you've already shown people just in your role with Turkuaz and all the super jams and the collaborations you've done through the years that we've talked about in the past. Yeah, and one of the cool things that there's been so much amazing content released, both like the live streams that many artists are doing, and of course the stuff out of the vault. So before we go, I'm going to touch on each of those. First, you've been getting together with some cats to do some really cool, like spur of the moment live stream performances. What are those about? And you think you're going to do any more?
Yeah, well, the one that we did, the Stay in a live stream, was really like almost before we weren't even allowed to go out of our houses, I guess. We were still allowed to kind of have the like under 10 people thing. And Lauren Kashuk from Ideazon, we were just talking, and it was like before the live stream thing was really such a big thing. We kind of got in at the beginning. She's like, can we just put something together, because all of our stuff's canceled? What are we going to do? We need to just like create. We need to connect. We need to make music. So I called up Alex Wasili from Dumpster Funk, the trombone player. And again, I'm new to LA, so like I don't actually have all my cats that I would normally call in New York, right? So he helped out on that. We got a bunch of people from other bands, Super Jam style, put together, and it was like we didn't know how to do this live stream stuff yet, so it was a beautiful collection of people just figuring it out and putting it together. The response was great. We got up to like 50,000 views, I think, and yeah, it was a beautiful, like one of those thrown together things that you have no idea how it's going to go, but it was great. It was really nice to do that. We put together songs that we wanted to, feel good, appropriate, like for the moment. We got our Stevie and Jill Scott in there and just like all the good ones. And and I think I'm going to probably do one on my own, because what else am I going to do? I got to make some music. So I'll probably do a live stream pretty soon. But, sans band.
Right. Well, you play the hand you're dealt. I'm sure it's going to be dope. And yeah, of course, Alex is a G, and I'm sure he got, quick dial-in, and the crew you put together for that first Staying Alive performance was dope. And it's kind of almost was like a super jam, like you would find at like a Jazz Fest event or something, like a late night,
totally,
but live stream style. And that was really cool, especially in light of the fact that, we lost Jazz Fest, or at least postponed. So it was a little brief sliver of a reminder of how we
like learn all this stuff really quickly, no rehearsal, and we'll see how it goes. But everybody came correct, so it was super fun.
Right on. And speaking of coming correct, man, I've so loved the Nuns a Ton Turkuaz live concert release, which you guys were kind enough to drop while we're all stuck on here at home on punishment. So what are some of your reflections of, because that's sort of like the sort of exclamation point at the end of the Colors era, and you guys had transitioned shortly after that, and the new era was well underway. What are some of the reflections or memories, or just paint the picture of what the Nuns a Ton experience was like?
Well, it was really cool. I mean, to be a part of making a film, which I had never done before. And then we had a couple days of filming, and then we had a live audience, and it was really like a beautiful culmination, I guess, of that whole time. Like we knew we were moving on to a next phase. So like for me, I guess at that point it had been like 4 or 5 years, I'm not sure exactly, to look back on all this music that we've been playing for so long, and then to kind of be like, this is what it is, and this is a piece of media that we can always look at and we can always have. And then the fact alone that we couldn't play live, and just to be like, here you go, guys, have a little dance party. So yeah, Danny and Dave did an incredible job on that, and I'm glad we got to give it to the people now, especially.
Definitely. I mean, we certainly would do appreciate it at any time, but to get it at this time is definitely choice and appreciated on like a more profound level.
And we did the premiere in Brooklyn at the movie theater, and just like seeing myself on a screen that big, it was pretty dope. I thought I was gonna hate it and be super scared and embarrassed about it, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I can only imagine seeing it on the big screen like that.
Yeah.
And with Turkuaz, you guys are always so busy, and it's got to be, even though it sucks, there's no way around the slowdown being brutal financially and otherwise, but it's good to have this time to yourselves, and hopefully when you can get back in the bus or the van or however you guys do it, everyone will be refreshed and, reborn in a sense. from the downtime?
I mean, that's what if we can take anything beautiful from this, which obviously there's so much shittiness, but like it really feels like a true reset for everyone, for the earth, for the rat race, for this, take a second to be like, what have we done? What have we come to?
Yeah,
That, I guess, is a gift.
It is indeed. And one last thing I've been asking every guest that's been kind enough to come on the show, sort of a gift in a sense. Is there an artist or a song or really any music that is getting SHIRA through this particular time?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like totally new, but like the PJ Morton live Gumbo album, it came on the other night when I was kind of having a rough day, and that track, Everything's Gonna Be Alright, I think like BJ the Chicago Kid is on it, and that whole album in general, the Gumbo Unplugged, PJ Morton, but I think it's called All Right. It's like the last track, and they just jam out on like the arrangement on it. So yeah, that I could listen to it over and over again. It makes me feel so good.
Right on.
PJ Morton, Gumbo Unplugged.
We got it. Well, thank you so much, SHIRA. We can hear that desert wind howling, and hope you enjoy the rest of your time out there.
Thanks
the best
for
you
chatting.
can. Yeah, it's a pleasure, a privilege. So we'll look out for the new track on Friday.
Yes, April 10th, Burning. Download it. Buy it. Share it.
Will do. And we'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye, V.
Of my life, full of cloudy dreams unreal, full of tastes no tongue can know, and lights no eye can see. When there was no ear to hear, you sang to me.
When there was no ear to hear, you sang to me. I want to thank SHIRA ELIAS for that thoughtful and really wonderful chat from Arizona. And look out for that new single, Burnin', this Friday. SHIRA ELIAS Goods and Services. Sounds dope, as does the forthcoming EP. So we'll be on the lookout for that. It's a big SHIRA ELIAS house, the Upful LIFE Podcast. And now I had to get one more interview, I should say conversation or powwow, with really one of my best friends in the whole world. Like, no bullshit. He's on the first hand. I've known him for most of my life, and he's one of the most loyal friends and just stand-up dudes. Anyone should only hope that they could have a friend like J.A. in their lives. And anyone who knows him knows this. J.A. is also an encyclopedia of music, history, culture, of course, sports, and pro wrestling. Has a fucking incredible sense of humor. Super just empathetic, righteous, incredible friend. And hilarious. And I've always kind of seen him as a regular appearance on the Upful LIFE Podcast. And we started out in the very first few. He came on a couple of times, and then my man is a busy dude out there in Philadelphia. He's got a lot of irons in the fire, and I'm on the other side of the country. And a lot of times when we get on the phone, we just want to shoot the shit, and we don't need to tape it and broadcast it for the world, or however many people actually tune in. And if you made it this deep in the podcast, you know, you'll be rewarded with just a very poignant, frank, touching conversation with my best bud, J.A. Talk a lot of fish, as we are wont to do. We talk the reality of the COVID-19 virus, music industry, concert industry, sports, wrestling, and more. So with that, we're going to let this Addicts of My Life off American Beauty play for a moment longer, and then we'll hear from the one and only J.A. live and direct from Philadelphia.
Secrets all are told, and the petals all unfold. When there was no dream of mine, you dreamed of me.
Hello.
J.A.
How's it going, Brian?
Oh, man. It's going, dude. I'm talking to you from a really beautiful place out here in Northern California on this ranch. So I'm blessed, but lots and lots of folks not so lucky. How about you, my friend?
I'm okay. I'm talking to you from the beautiful streets of Philadelphia. Before we get started, though, let's take a little time out. R.I.P. Bill Withers.
Yes, indeed, my friend. Yeah, seismic loss for the music culture. Ellis, Marsalis the day before. Man, as if it wasn't bad enough, we losing these giants, man. So respect and rest in
I was
peace.
always fascinated by the Bill Withers career, how he just had so much success and then just, kind of walked away from the business. A very interesting man.
Yeah, I mean, and his life will be talked about and discussed and celebrated quite a bit in the time to come. And there's been many tributes to him. And just taking a look at the songbook, like his cuts, talk about anthems that are woven into the fabric of, like, doesn't matter when you were born, what the color of your skin is, or where you're from. Like, Bill Withers' tunes really get you in the feels.
Absolutely. He was an absolute legend. When I read that this morning, I was devastated.
Yeah, likewise. So before we get into your situation home, I was in touch with a mutual friend of ours, Gabe Rock, who's out on the front lines. He's a nurse in Arizona, and he of course sends his regards, and just want to let you know to keep Gabe in your prayers, because it's like a war zone out there.
Love Gabe. I just found out, recently that he was working in the medical field, which is awesome. God bless him, and he's probably one of the greatest guitar players I've ever shook hands with.
Absolutely. Gabe came over, or I should say I went over to his place in 5th grade, and we jammed, and the rest is history, and he's got a special place in both of our hearts and our whole hometown crew. So, Gabe, if you're out there listening, we love you. What's it like in Philly right now, Jason? Like, whether it's the hospitals or the streets of Philadelphia, as you succinctly quoted the boss. Give us the vibe in Philly.
Well, I don't know what's going on at the hospitals, thank God, but in my neighborhood, it's been pretty quiet. People are only leaving their house to walk their dogs, or, take a little walk themselves, or maybe take the kid out. The strange thing is like, I know it has to, but like SEPTA and the buses and the trains, they are still running. So they need to get people to work and stuff. And I understand that, but it almost like has people, there's probably people on there that shouldn't be on there. I'm not really, I do on a whole think that Philadelphia is doing a good job. We're right next to New Jersey and New York, which are, really feeling this. And, we've been pretty good so far, knock on wood.
That's reassuring to hear, my friend, at least, your assessment of the situation. And I guess I only asked about the hospitals as if there was any, reporting. Let's talk about today's a glorious, monumental day in history. I know we both shared the 4/3/1998 fish show in Nassau, which goes down in the annals, and I made a short post about it today. Do you have any recollections of your excursion up to Nassau from Philly and that time in our lives?
Well, it was definitely early in my fish career. I think it was the third year of seeing the band live, and heading up to Nassau for 2 of the 4 shows of the island tour was so exciting. Just remember, it's more reflection, it was more of a fun time. It was more innocent back then. It was $25 tickets. I don't know, just the vibe. Everyone was a little younger, but it was and fans have broken up to 3 different eras, and that was 1.0 fish, and it was just a different time,
It definitely was, and I was thinking we were so less interconnected. We would have to dial on to the web, and the phone in our pocket, if we had one, certainly didn't have anything other than talk, text, maybe a photo. That said, there was this sense of adventure. I jumped in a car with Stephen and Ollie. I was in college in Burlington, and on a whim chose to come down to the shows, and got word through maybe Mike Slater that you were coming up, and we had that amazing experience, just the adventure, and then also obviously the iconic fish shows. And when I go back to the old days and I'm playing fish, tonight's anniversary show is almost always at the top of the list. But let's talk 2020 fish. Before we get to the what ifs on the summer tour, they did this album listening release party, which was a success, at the very least an exposure, and it seems to be incredibly well received. Before we assess the music a little, what did you think about just them choosing that method to roll it out at this time, and just your experience, how you took it in?
Well, leading up to it, Trey was releasing songs every day. So you got the feeling that Trey was feeling what we were feeling and kind of wanted to reach out to us, play some music. So I don't know. I kind of in my head, just I guess maybe he thought to himself, hey, man, we're sitting on these tracks. They're masters. The fans are at home. Let's throw the tracks out at them. That was kind of the vibe I got. But, I mean, who knows?
Right. Well, obviously the story has been reported now that they had done the session a while back, or sessions, and then the producer from Nashville, Vance Powell, I think is his name, was had other stuff going on, so he didn't get to mix it till March, and then it was hey, we need this now. And I thought it was cool to be interconnected. I saw people that we went to high school with in the live chat, if you will, and have heard from so many folks in the aftermath. I gotta say, it's cool. I love some of the tunes. I like a lot of them. The sound of the album is really raw and organic and has a great fabric to it. But all that to say, the last 9 minutes of thread is the fish I've been waiting for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, that ends the record. So I think that that was great placement. You kind of waited around to the end and you got a real special treat.
Yeah, and that's a typical fish too. Play a lot of song-oriented stuff, save for the Everything's Right jam. I heard a little bit of Stonesy New Orleans in the new take on Everything's Right. On the whole, did you have any favorites, or what is your take on Sigma Oasis?
Well, what's awesome about being a fish fan and seeing fish it's similar to some of the old school rock bands and the Grateful Dead, where these bands toured a lot more and they would test songs on the road that weren't on records. And obviously Fish and the Grateful Dead would play tons of songs that aren't on records. So the fact that we knew a lot of these songs, or all of them, but I actually heard most of them going into the record, was awesome, you know, because you already had a little relationship with it.
Exactly, and it's funny because the Dead and the Fish are kind of the exception to the rule. A lot of bands don't feel comfortable road testing songs before they lay them down. Lettuce does it from time to time, and jam bands, I guess, in general, will take things to the stage early. But yeah, there was a loose familiarity with a lot of the tunes, some of them as old as like Steam, and then something as recent as, say, Ghost of the Forest. I thought it was a cool kind of snapshot. You got me, J.A.?
Yeah, you were going a little bit now, but I thought that was great. Encompass some non-Fish material, even though Fish has been playing some of that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I'll try to edit out any of the ins and outs, because I'm really in the middle of nowhere and talking to you from
fix it up.
But that said, what about your other side of your passion and profession, and that's the world of pro wrestling that I've been, it's been one of the great joys of our friendship is the fact that I can always go to you for the sort of minutia that we love about music. What's how has the virus affected, you're an independent wrestling commentator and very involved on the local level, but nobody knows more about the big leagues than you. Give us the state of the proverbial union with pro wrestling.
Well, just like other, businesses that perform for people, most wrestling has been shut down. After tomorrow, or this weekend, Vince McMahon will be running his WrestleMania, and then after that, there really won't be too much new wrestling produced. We had two big shows ourselves lined up, and they both got canceled. One of them postponed. One of them canceled because one of them was kind of a big deal with a lot of cosplayers and comic book stuff involved. So that's going to be hard to reprogram. But I think just like any business, the restaurant industry, everyone's feeling the heat right now. And, there's similar stuff online for some of these independent wrestlers, GoFundMe's, and just podcasts are telling their fans to go buy some T-shirts and merchandise, just like you would do with your favorite band.
Right on, man. Yeah, I imagine that, we could talk off air about what we think, whether or not Vince having a show to an empty house is the right move, sends the right message. But that said, do you feel like that the wrestling business will have a similarly uphill battle like the music industry when, they start letting 200 people congregate, then 1,000? Then...
Definitely. I heard the people from the NFL were talking about how they're going to handle their schedule. And, they really, they packed 60,000 people into 16 stadiums every Sunday. And they do not want to play football and have 60,000 people in a stadium again until a majority of the country has been tested and there are no more cases popping up. So that tells me you might not see football this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reality that people will start to reckon with in the coming weeks. But as somebody that I know, and we both love football, and certainly, fly Eagles fly. I got to say, though, the NFL could even survive a dark season because they're that much of a financial monolith. However, I know you from obviously elementary school, but also I know you from the concert business. And a lot of our listeners are coming from a music industry place or even as a fan. What do you think is the reality for the concert industry moving forward? You think that we're going to have to go booking multiple shows in the same night at the same venue, or tag team touring routing? Just spitballing. What do you see? How do we get back to the clubs, theaters, and arenas?
Well, what you said is definitely has some upside to it. the highly anticipated Rage Against the Machine tour was supposed to do 5 nights at Madison Square Garden. So maybe they could do an afternoon show and a night show. That stuff used to happen back in the late 60s, early 70s. The Rolling Stones would do an afternoon show and do a night show. So it's something it's not uncommon. But that being said, I really feel that the concert industry will probably piggyback off of the sports industry. And after they make their decision, that's when I think the concert industry will probably open up again. Only because I say that when it deals with the hockey arenas and the basketball arenas, because, of course, the NHL and the NBA is going to have first dibs in filling their schedule out. And then the big wigs like Live Nation and AEG will be able to put some holds and fill in the dates in between.
Gotcha, man. And that's something that obviously applies to, when we're talking about Fish Tour, which as the time of us talking hasn't been canceled, but Trey Band has. It's hard to imagine that Fish won't be. And then, of course, they will have to, second priority to these franchises and sports teams.
Yeah, I think Live Nation it looks like they're working about 6 weeks ahead. Like, so if you notice, like a lot of the stuff in May was just announced, canceled or postponed. And I think they're just looking about 6 weeks ahead, but they kind of know the deal is that you're probably not going to have a summer concert series that you're familiar with.
Yeah, well, safety first and everyone's health and happiness. The music one day will play again. We'll all get to dance again. I look forward to sharing in the groove, whether it's Fish or otherwise, with you, my dear friend. Before we go, I got to ask you what I'm asking everybody that's coming on the show at these troubling times. Do you have a song, a show, an artist that is really getting you through or resonating with you at this time? Anything?
Well, I mean, I think like a lot of your listeners, I love the Grateful Dead. I listen to the Grateful Dead every week. I probably listen to the Grateful Dead more than I listen to any other band. I don't necessarily know if they're my favorite band, but they definitely get the most airplay. And every time I listen to them, I feel great.
Well, God bless the Grateful Dead, J.A.
Absolutely.
I'm actually standing in the region, in essence, where it all began, and you can feel the spirit. And we've been playing a lot of reggae and a lot of Jerry, a lot of Garcia.
Yeah, I listened to American Beauty yesterday, and I think I got that record when I was in 5th or 6th grade, so probably right around the time I met you. And listening to it yesterday, I was just as enjoyed as I have the last 30 years of listening to that record.
Yeah, right on. It's a timeless classic, the vocal harmonies, everything, the songs. For the listeners that don't know our tremendous history, where did we really meet in 5th or 6th grade, specifically?
I would have to say the groundbreaking meeting for you and I was at a KISS concert at the Philadelphia Spectrum, the Hot in the Shade tour. KISS, Little Caesar, who else was on the bill?
Slaughter.
On
the Up All Night and Fly High Michelle were all over Headbangers Ball at the time.
And unbeknownst to me, you're sitting in the seats right next to me. My father, your father had a similar connection that got us tickets. Bang. Wouldn't you know, best friends forever.
Man, I love you. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll check in with you down the road. But, man, stay safe, stay healthy, and virtually spread my love around to the Philly fam.
Absolutely. Peace and love. Peace and love.
Want to say, big up yourself, J.A., the one and only, my dear friend, for over 3 decades. And what a classic story of our first really meeting back in like 5th grade. Kiss, Slaughter, Little Caesar at the Spectrum Press Box. My man. So hopefully we'll get J.A. to come on in a semi-regular capacity here on the Upful LIFE Podcast, because I really love just rapping with him about all the things. You know, he brought me on his college radio show upwards of 25 years ago, give or take. The Jason Abrams Show on Camden County College Radio, I believe. And been always looking to reciprocate and return the favor. Once upon a time, I kicked a freestyle rap over Jamiroquai instrumental live on the air. I believe my man Dr. Schaus, Matt Shapiro's got that on cassette somewhere. But I digress. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for supporting the Upful LIFE Podcast, supporting independent musicians, artists, and the culture. You can reach me, b.gets@upfullife.com, with any kind of, reactions, reflections, responses, suggestions, constructive criticism. Welcome and encouraged. Please rate and or review the podcast on iTunes. Super stoked if you could do that. Gets the algorithms moving in the right direction. You're hearing break science in the background. And with that, we'll get to the Vibe Junkie Jam of the Week. Now, once upon a time, a random rap episode, I told a real personalized story that really seemed to resonate with a number of listeners. So I thought I would tell another personal story for those who are still hanging on to the show after 4 interviews. Real quick before the Vibe Junkie Jam of the Week, which will come to you from Break Science. So it's no secret that for a calendar year, late 2014 to late 2015, I was incarcerated in Northern California for cannabis distribution. And during that time when I was down, a couple months in, I got wind that I could order a transistor radio and earbuds from Commissary. It was like ridiculously overpriced. It was one of those like $3 radios, clear, so you couldn't sneak anything in it. You could see all the electronics inside the primitive transistor radio. But it was my salvation. At that point in time, I really didn't have any music I could hear. So talk about, being imprisoned. No music. It was jail in itself, but I actually was in jail with no music. And finally I got these headphones and this radio, and I would listen to the local radio station up here in Northern California, Nevada City area. And KVMR, it was called. Listen to all these different shows that were regular on a weekly basis or bi-weekly. Grateful Dead was every Saturday night. There were a couple of reggae shows. Redlocks was one of them on Friday nights. There was like a Bohemian Grooves with the DJ Faye, who's the one that played me the random rap, and I talked about this on that episode before. But somewhere along the way, early in my having the headphones, out of nowhere, on one of those shows, I believe it was also, it might have been Mystic Al, played Break Science Once in a While, which features Sonia Kitchell, and it's on their album 7 Bridges from 2013, which was in essence like a soundtrack to my first year here in California, which was glorious, and ended in a dark place with me locked up and shamed, and my dad died while I was inside. It was, dark times. But I heard Deitch one night in my headphones, out of nowhere. I had no idea it was coming. Break Science Once in a While, my favorite song from Seven Bridges and my favorite break science song. And it broke me. I was so attached to Adam as an artist and musician. Love him and Borum as break science. Such a personal relationship with their music and their ethos and just what they do. So I heard this song you're hearing in the background and wept like a baby in my bunk. Fast forward to when I was released in October of 2015. I was headed to Halloween at the end of the month, but there's a local festival here called the Hangtown Halloween Ball. And both Lettuce and Break Science were playing at the Hangtown Halloween Ball. And I wasn't exactly ready for the enormity that was Halloween. Right off the bat, having been down for a year. Conveniently, there was this smaller, intimate fest, kind of like the sort of nephew or niece festival to High Sierra, called Hangtown Halloween Ball. And we went up there for the weekend, and I was a little bit shook and nervous. And we stopped by the hotel where the Lettuce Boys and Borum were staying. Quick hello on the way to the festival, and we headed over. And Break Science was playing that evening. The sun was going down. I decided it would be the first music that I would hear after I got out of jail for a year would be Break Science at sunset at Hangtown Halloween Ball. And we rolled up there. I went up to the stage by myself, as I recall, and I was just standing there watching the sun go down. Adam and Borum took the stage, and they couldn't have known. They really couldn't have known that I had heard Once in a While in my headphones when I was locked up, and it was such a pivotal moment for me and sort of turned the page in a lot of ways and showed me that I could still get that sort of spiritual boost of music even in L-Tank, Placer County Jail. And that was just an absolute gift. And that song, Once in a While, featuring Sonia Kitchell on Seven Bridges, really represents that turning of the page for me when I was locked up. And Break Science opened with that. The very first music that I was going to hear when I went to that stage, Hangtown Halloween Ball, and I just obviously was overcome. And it was just a magical moment in time that just stopped, and it was just me and Adam and Borum and that setting sun and the song. And then the next thing I remember is my good pal Tony B, NOLA, New Orleans cat that actually lives out in Tahoe, put his arm around me, and we embraced and chatted, and I was back to reality. And I have a feeling Tony probably was standing there for a few minutes letting me have that moment, because he's well aware of all the things that I described with my relationship to that music and to Adam and Borum and the heaviness of the moment that he was walking up on. So with that, I'm going to play this new acoustic version of Once in a While that Adam and Borum posted a few weeks back, and they're in an apartment in Colorado, or a house, grand piano or baby grand and a little synth, and Adam on a small trap drum kit. So it's acoustic Break Science, Once in a While, and then that'll be that. for the Vibe Junkie Jam of the Week and the Upful Life Podcast, episode 30, Isolation Station, volume 2. This once in a while track, just like the original, got me through that time in a major way. This acoustic version, also broke me the other day when I was listening to it here on the ranch, staring out into the Sierra Nevada mountains. The heaviness of what we're all living collectively dawned upon me as the emotional quotient of this music was just so potent. So check it out. It's from YouTube. Break Science Once in a While Acoustic. Thank you for listening to that story. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for supporting the Upful Life Podcast, supporting me, supporting your local musician and greater music communities. I love you. This is the Upful Life Podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz, and we'll see you next week. Yes, indeedy.